Schaffer began his service after being elected to the Ohio House of Representatives in 2000. Then in 2006, after serving 3 terms as a state representative for Ohio's 5th House District, Senator Schaffer was elected to the Ohio Senate, representing the 31st Senate District, which includes all of Fairfield, Licking, Hocking, and Perry counties, as well as the eastern portion of Pickaway County. And again, as Senator Schaffer comes up, I'd like a special thank you for his service to our district over the last several years.
Thank you so much, and thank you to the Chamber for hosting this once again. This is always, I think, just about my favorite event of the year because it's right before the holidays. It's after the election. People are winding down, getting ready for family events, and it's a great time for us to bring some news to you from the capitals, wherever we happen to represent you at. And it is an absolute thrill to be joining you again, and I appreciate your hospitality. And it's a true honor to serve you. As alluded, a lot of districts are changing, changing all over the place, and I will be serving out my term limits. It'll be 8 years and 2 years as a state senator and 6 years as your senator here, and it has been an absolute thrill and honor to serve you as your state senator, and I really appreciate that opportunity and your faith that you've placed in me to represent you in Columbus in the state senate. And I got to say, too, that when I went into the Senate 6 years ago, my 2 best friends there were Steve Austria and Steve Stivers. These are 2 great guys. There's one thing out of all this redistricting, reapportionment stuff that I take as a positive, and that is we've had the honor to have 2 awesome fellows representing us in Congress. Steve Austria for the last 4 years and Steve Stivers in the next several years. And I tell you, both of these gentlemen are just wonderful. They're impressive. I think Steve Stivers is going to impress you just like Steve Austria has. And Steve Austria, where you're sitting at, oh, there you are. I know you won't be a stranger. You found a second home here in Fairfield County, and that means a lot to hear that when you and Eileen say that. And you're best friends forever, and the same with Karen and Steve Stivers. And I want to thank this chamber, too, for hosting our Economic Development Summit in June. Travis, wherever you're at, I'm trying to remember the date in June 5th or 6th. That was great attendance, and it was a good program. Proud to bring it to you. And that kind of came out of the idea of the Economic Development Summits came out of the meetings I have with our folks at the state level who tell us the news about new incentives and work with us and cutting taxes and creating new incentives for business and jobs. And I thought, wow, this is awesome news, and it's all here on my desk. We need to get it out to the counties. We need to get it out to our districts. So we've held economic development summits in every county. We've done several of them here in Fairfield County. I'm proud to say that the Lancaster Fairfield Chamber is on board with bringing you that information. I really appreciate the support and the effort there. And congratulations, too, to our city school system here for passing their bond to secure over $28 million in building funds from the state of Ohio. That was a great development for the city of Lancaster, for our schools and our community and our local economy here. So hats off to our schools for that achievement. And talking about education, I don't want to take Jerry's thunder because he's chair of the House Education Committee. But of the General Revenue Fund budget in the state of Ohio, education funding is now 34%, just a tad over 34% of the entire state budget. So that shows our commitment, as well as over $10 billion in school building funds that we've spent in the last decade and a half, shows commitment to our schools. Well, in my service to you, and particularly as chair of Ways and Means and Economic Development Committee, I've really had a vision that's very simple. And by the way, I have a handout on the side because I want to make sure that the ideas that come across my desk, you have a chance to grab a copy of and just call me or Jerry if you want details on these incentives. But my vision is very simple: create an Ohio that is the cradle of job creation, and to give the next generation a future that's brighter than we see today. And those goals that lead to that vision include protecting the tax cuts and gaining additional tax cuts where we can, protect the tort reforms that have led to lower physician insurance and business costs, continue supporting schools through our reforms and funding, and hopefully to vote the way you expect and give great constituent service. And that's kind of our mantra in our office. And I want to make sure we're focusing on what people want and need, what they're telling us, and what our economic data is showing us. And Congressman Oster mentioned it before, a quote from Ronald Reagan, that we don't have a revenue problem, we have a spending problem. And he also said that government sometimes has the endless appetite. And I think about that quite a bit in our work in the Ways and Means Committee. And I want to make sure that we're stopping tax increases in the Ways and Means Committee and the Senate dead in their tracks, because it's the one thing we can't afford to do when we're still in recession, and now we're looking at 4 more years of some policies that perhaps you wouldn't see that. I know you won't see in the state of Ohio coming from the federal level, from the White House. So we've got to make sure in Ohio at least we're doing everything we can to foster an environment for jobs creation. And as Governor Kasich would tell you, I'm sure, Ohio is open for business. We have some great things happening in this state. One thing we're taking a strong look at continually is the Utica shale potential. And I just found out from the Ohio Oil and Gas Association yesterday that here in Fairfield County we have 2 wells that are operating. They're producing out of the Utica shale. A year or 2 ago, we didn't know if the Utica shale came under Fairfield County, if that was part of our territory. Now we know it is. So we've got to be real cognizant of the $14 billion plus development costs and income, potential for income we have in this state in the next decade. And to make sure that we protect our tax cuts. You heard about the federal estate tax. We are repealing the estate tax here in the state of Ohio for our share of that tax. Again, that is to keep capital here in Ohio, in Fairfield County, to make sure that families that have worked hard to build a business, to build a farm that's passed down through the generations, can continue on as a small business or as a farm in Ohio. And we also got to make sure that we're continuing to work at workers' compensation and unemployment compensation. We're not out of the woods on unemployment comp. I've talked about that the last couple of cycles of this great event. And workers' comp, we got a great administrator in Steve Buer at workers' comp. In fact, he spoke at our Economic Development Summit back in June. Came down and presented to us. We got some good things moving in workers' comp, and I would like to see that agency continue to help small businesses, particularly where we can. Well, let's talk about results. We have some indicators that are looking very, very positive, looking up. And I mentioned Ohio's open for business. Well, here's proof positive. Ohio's new business filings are up 24% over last year, of October to October. 24%. That was just released this week by Secretary of State John Husted. Our unemployment rate has dropped to 6.9% as of October. That is a full point below the federal unemployment rate. Ohio is really becoming an oasis of jobs and the economy here in the Midwest. Yeah, and that's the 16th straight month that our unemployment has not increased, and it's the lowest since August of 2008. Well, we are certainly not out of the woods. We're making progress, but there are still too many Ohioans that are out of work or working 2 or 3 part-time jobs, whereas they used to have a full-time job with benefits. We have a lot of way to go. There's no doubt about it. We got a lot of work to do ahead of us. And that's where I would solicit your input, your advice, and your guidance to make sure we're doing the right things at the state of Ohio to help foster job development. Good, strong jobs here in the state of Ohio for our neighbors. Now, let me talk a little bit about the committee. And I know we have 4 speakers today, so I'm cutting a lot out of my remarks. The mayor asked me earlier, how long are you going to go, Tim? And I said, well, I think I'll trim my 55 minutes down to 35. How about that? But let me talk a little bit about what's happening in my committee, the Ways and Means and Economic Development Committee. The biggest issue we have right now is House Bill 510, which is the governor's top priority in lame duck session. This is a financial institutions taxation bill that completely redoes the financial institutions tax, and my goal is to make sure we're putting more capital, and you've heard me say this before, more capital in our neighborhoods, more capital in our communities, by making sure that the financial institutions who have not been paying, and you heard that earlier about another corporation, have not been paying taxes to the state of Ohio, pay something, and everybody else gets a revised tax burden. Why is that? Because again, we're driving business. Historically, we have driven business out of Ohio, and when you drive business out of Ohio, you drive jobs out of Ohio. The jobs go with those businesses. So we are reforming the financial institutions taxation process to increase capital in our neighborhoods, and that means loans and jobs. And also on the flyer over at the registration table, you can see more detail about some other bills that we've passed in the committee. And if you have any questions or need any information on those incentives, please don't hesitate to call us or email us. I might mention, too, that a bill we passed last year, Senate Bill 4, performance audits, has already yielded some great results for us. ODOT had it. It was one of the first 4 agencies to have a performance audit completed. And even before it's totally done, we found out that we could save almost $3 million in ODOT in heavy equipment purchases that we don't use year-round. We could rent vehicles, we could rent equipment, and not have equipment sitting in a garage 11 months out of the year, and then only use it for the 12th month. So that performance audit legislation is proving dividends already. One bill that I'm hoping we have it slated for a House vote, Jerry, next week, is Senate Bill 70, the arson registry. That was brought to me several years ago by the Ohio Association of Professional Firefighters, and we've been working with them for the last few years to get this to the point where it's ready for passage now. The governor's on board, the attorney general's on board, we got everybody on board with it, and we should see action on that in the House next week and send that to the governor's desk. Finally, just from my first day in office, in the House 11 years ago, I pledged as your representative then to make sure we root out corruption and prevent corruption anywhere we possibly can. We got to always be vigilant and make sure that it doesn't enter government service. Towards that end, I carried an amendment that we got into the Jobs Ohio 2 bill, that creates ethical standards for Jobs Ohio staff. And why is that important? We want to make sure that they have ethical guardrails, they have legal guardrails when they are negotiating multi-million-dollar deals with companies that want to come or expand in Ohio. We want to make sure that we have nothing but the best code of ethics in Jobs Ohio. And they've been working wonderfully with me to make sure we're getting that accomplished. And also in consultation with State Auditor Dave Yost, we've sponsored together, along with Representative Hagan over in the House, Senate Bill 339, the Fiscal Officer Accountability Act. We've had far too many cases of embezzlement and theft, and local governments, fortunately not here, and clerk treasurers and fiscal officers and positions like that, not having a lot of oversight and are not having a lot of checks and balances. So this legislation proposes to add checks and balances and a lot of oversight to our local governments where hundreds of thousands of dollars can come up missing and nobody knows until there's an audit a couple years later. So we want to make sure that that doesn't happen. And finally, I do want to close with a quick story that illustrates how important it is to communicate with your legislators, all of us, as well as local public officials. I had a gentleman come to me about 6 or 8 months ago from the district who had gotten himself behind on some commitments. And long story short, he needed some renegotiation help with the state of Ohio. We jumped in, helped him renegotiate a bill he had to pay. He didn't get a single penny off. He paid it all. But he was 1 week, about just under a week, from laying off 120 employees. So my staff and I got to work, helped him out, gave him some advice, advocated for him with the state of Ohio, and we got him put on a better payment plan, one that he could work with his cash flow during this horrible recession. And it was really brought on by a lot of the new banking regs from the federal government that, in this case, were pretty draconian on his business model. long story short, got a letter from him a few weeks ago saying, you know, if you hadn't done something, if you hadn't advocated for me, and we hadn't been able to work with you on this and work with the state of Ohio, I would have laid off 120 employees by now, 120 families. And, you know, my hat's off to the Kasich administration and everybody that works for him in this endeavor, how good they were to work with, and making sure that this business could continue as an ongoing operation, because there would be 120 families this week potentially not having Thanksgiving that we were able to pull together and help save. And that said, he also closed his letter with, and by the way, I paid the bill off early. And so he was pretty proud of that. So that's what a lot of us can do and will do for you in government service. Be your advocate, help you, make sure that the government is not sending the hammer down on you too hard, on this, certainly unnecessarily, and making sure that we can prosper, we can provide jobs in our communities and neighborhoods, and we're here to serve you. And it's very proud thing to be able to do that. And again, I thank you very much. I look forward to working with you in the future. And y'all have a wonderful Thanksgiving, a very Merry Christmas. Thank you so much.